Welcome to another broadcast of Truth Be Told, where we believe in experience becomes truth. I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and joining me in studio, you have a very special guest today, intuitive Tricia Carr. Today, Bob Crane, who was murdered in 1978. He was the star of Hogan's Heroes in the 60s, and he received 2 Primetime Emmy Award nominations for his work on the series. But after the series, Crane's career declined, and many didn't know there was a dark side to Bob Crane. Today, we are going to be talking about his infamous murder, one of Hollywood's biggest unsolved mysteries. We have Emmy-winning journalist John Hook going to be on the show talking about his book, Who Killed Bob Crane? The Final Close-Up. John is a veteran news reporter and television anchor for over 30 years in Arizona. He has won more than a dozen Emmys for his reporting, named Associated Press Anchor of the Year 5 times, and has covered every major story from O.J. Simpson murder case to the impeachment of President Bill Clinton. With John's background in journalism, this book is amazing, and I think you're going to learn something today, going to be entertained, and who knows, we might find out who actually killed Bob Crane. So please welcome to Truth Be Told, author, Emmy Award-winning journalist, John Hook. Wow. You didn't know you were going to get a full audience, did you?
Well, Tony and Tricia, that's a huge buildup. I don't know if I can live up to that kind of hype. That was big.
All right, well, then the interview's over. So, all right. So, well, Tricia, I'm so glad Tricia's here. One thing I love about having someone like yourself, we're talking about like a murder mystery and something that, especially when it's dealing with celebrity. And Tricia is an intuitive, very talented intuitive, so it's going to be kind of interesting to see if you get any hits on this unsolved murder.
Yeah, let's see.
All
Definitely.
Right. Well, John.
I love that idea.
I know. This is going to be great. So,
cool.
Well, John, I remember growing up. I mean, it was before I was born, you know, with Hogan's Heroes. But in the reruns, I used to watch Hogan Heroes all the time with my family. And of course, you know, as I got older, I didn't even know he was murdered until, you know, I got older and I started really getting into this kind of the unsolved mysteries. Can you tell us your background of how you got involved with, you know, Bob Crane and the murder itself? I know you're a journalist, but I mean, did you have anything to do with it? Come on, were you related to him, or, you know, accomplished, or what? Okay, no, go ahead.
No,
so how did
Tony, like you, I grew up with Bob Crane. Now I am old enough that I actually remember it as a kid. Being on television. I mean, it ran from 1965 to 1971. It was a brilliant show. And I thought it was cool back then. I thought all the gimmicks and all the crazy stuff they did in Stalag 13 was really hilarious. But I didn't really fully appreciate the comedic genius to the show until I was older and saw it in reruns. And it just was brilliantly written. It was a brilliant show. They did a great job on it, and Crane was amazing.
No, he had such a great timing, comedic timing, but he was kind of, to me, kind of the Dean Martin of, you know, very handsome, yes. And you know, he had that dry sense of humor. This kind of a straight man, but then, you know, he had the humor of Lucy, or actually more like Ricky,
okay.
Like, you know,
sure,
Ricky Ricardo.
Good point. Yeah.
So when you like all of us, when we hear about a celebrity getting murdered, it's a great loss to the community of Hollywood. But what got you where you wanted to write a book about it? You know, because we hear you. I mean, you've seen, being a journalist, hundreds of thousands of stories. But what made you want to focus on this one to write a book?
I never set out to write a book about this. I interviewed Bob Crane's son, Bob Jr., who wrote the foreword for my book, Who Killed Bob Crane. Mm-hmm. I met him in March of 2015. And that interview was for a book he had written about his father called Crane, Celebrity, Sex, and My Father's Unsolved Murder. It's really the perspective of the family kind of going through this and what his family was like in his own career. Bob Jr. had a brilliant career in his own right as a writer, a celebrity writer. He was John Candy's assistant for many years. He's an interesting guy. I interviewed him, and I really like Bob right from the get-go. He's a wonderful guy and a very intuitive guy. And I just felt after that interview that there were so many unanswered questions about his father's murder that I felt still dogged him and plagued him to this day. And so after that, and I'm really close to my father, who's 92 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I just thought it's so unfair for the family that they don't have a definitive answer. And it bothered me for days after the interview. And I just kind of ruminated about this, and I thought about it and I thought about it. And I can't tell you guys when it came to me exactly, but I thought, where's all the evidence in that case? Is it still around? If it's still around, could we find the blood evidence? And if we found the blood evidence, could we retest it using modern DNA science and maybe get an answer that they couldn't get back in 1978 or in the late 80s and 90s when they put John Carpenter on trial for the murder? All of the DNA was inconclusive the first 4 go-arounds. I thought, DNA has come light years.
Definitely.
Maybe we could retest this stuff and get an answer. And it just became a story for television that was so rich and so full of layers that in the middle of it, I turned to my photographer. I said, I've got to write a book about this. I have got to write a book about this. And that's what I did.
So, okay, but writing a book is one thing, but doing the research is another. Where do you start? Where do you start with your research? Because that's a big subject. And like you said, it's been, since 1978. So that's been a while. When did you start your research, and where did you start your research?
The first call was to Bob Crane Jr. to get his blessing. I told him, I said, are you sitting down? And I discussed this in the book. I said, I've got an idea and I want to run it by you. And I mean this with all sincerity. And I was worried he'd be offended when I brought it up. I said, if I can find it, I would like to see if the Maricopa County Attorney's Office, with whom I have a long, long relationship, having been in Phoenix for, almost 30 years now. Right. I said, if I can find that evidence, I want to retest it. How do you feel about that? Thinking that he might say, please just let sleeping dogs lie. Our family's been through enough. There was silence on the end of the phone, and I thought I'd offended him. And he said, oh my God, is that possible?
Oh, that's so sweet.
Could you do that? Is that possible? I said, Bob, I don't know where the evidence is. We got to find it first. If we could find it, it might be possible. Are you on board? Will you help me? Because I thought I might need blood samples from Bob Crane Jr. for DNA comparison purposes. He said, I'm totally with you. I'm on board. I will help you in any way I can, and I'll talk to my family about it tonight. And he did. The second call was to the county prosecutor who put John Carpenter on trial, Bob Crane's good friend, who was the lead suspect for many, many years. I called former Maricopa County Attorney Rick Romley. I said, Rick, are you sitting down? The same spiel. Again, silence on the phone. He said, oh my God, fantastic. Yes, do it. Do it. If you can get an answer that we couldn't get, do it. I said, Rick, do you know where the evidence is? He said, I don't. He said, I think it's in the basement of the old county courthouse. I said, will you help me and assist me and guide me on this? And he said he would. Then the next call was to the county attorney's office to find out where this evidence was, and nobody had any idea where it was. So it took months of searching to find it. 11 boxes of evidence, which is chronicled in the book, Who Killed Bob Crane. They found it. They had to go through it and catalog every piece of evidence, because after John Carpenter's trial, everything was poured into packing boxes with no rhyme nor reason. It wasn't put back in the boxes it was originally in. So everything was jumbled. Wow. They had to inventory all that. And at the same time, they're looking for blood evidence, DNA samples, and they finally found him. Amazing. It took months. And I get the call one day, we found it. After being told over and over, we have looked, there is no blood evidence in there. We think we destroyed it because it was biohazard. I got all kinds of answers. They found it.
But it's amazing, not only that they found it, but I think it's quite amazing that they went after this and exhausted this search the way they did at the request of a journalist. That's not typical, right?
No, Tricia, absolutely right. And I think my relationship with them was the foundation.
Right.
They felt that if I did it, the county attorney now, Bill Montgomery, who signed off on it, I give him great credit. He said to his staff, he said, do you think it's worth his effort? I mean, do you think it's worth all this? And the consensus in the room was, if he can do it and pay for the testing, which we did, it might be worth it to get an answer for the family.
Oh, that's so
And
lovely.
so that became the predicate for it, was that if we can get an answer, as Bill Montgomery told me, he said, I'm not afraid of the truth. If you can get answers that we couldn't get back then, I'm all for it. I'm game. So they bagged it up. They packaged it as they would any other cold case. They handled the evidence, not I. I mean, we all had gloves on in there, and I touched the samples, which were encased in plastic going back to 1994. They were still in those original packages from Cellmark, which is now Bodie Cellmark Forensics, where we sent it for the testing. They did OJ. They did John Benet Ramsey. Wow. They're one of the best labs in the world. So we didn't mess around. We went high end on all of this to make sure it was done right, because we knew we had nitroglycerin in our hands, right?
Yeah.
So they packaged it up as they would any other cold case. They handled the evidence. We just happened to pay the bill for it.
Well, I want to ask you this for the people that may not know the trial at all. We've thrown out his name a couple times, and I'm throwing his picture up there for the people that are listening to the podcast. John Carpenter was on trial. Did he get convicted?
He was acquitted.
Acquitted. Okay, so what was the reason that they took him into custody in the first place?
Well, he was hanging around with Bob Crane in the summer of 1978. He was down here in Scottsdale. Bob Crane was playing the Windmill Dinner Theater. He had, after Hogan's was off the air, he had to make money, and he was making it doing dinner theater. He was here in Scottsdale. Carpenter was a video salesman, the first from Sony Electronics in the nation to sell video equipment. He was introduced to Crane on the set of Hogan's Heroes by Richard Dawson, who was, the Family Feud guy,
right, of course.
Peter Newkirk on the show. He was introduced by Dawson to Crane, and Crane and Carpenter struck up a fast friendship. Carpenter was selling video equipment to the well-heeled and the rich and famous in Hollywood. This was stuff that was not available to the general public in the 60s. He got this stuff. He was able to get it, and he was selling it to Red Skelton and to Elvis and people like this. Bob Crane got a hold of it. Bob Crane was fascinated with three things: electronics, photography, and women.
I was going to say.
And that was the same thing for Carpenter.
So probably not in that order.
Just absolute kindred spirits.
Apparently,
so
like
Carpenter
to put them all
would meet Crane out on the road during the dinner theater period, and ostensibly to do work for his video company, which at that time, by that point in 1978, was Akai. He had left Sony. He would go out on the road and meet Crane, and there was no business done, very little. It was all picking up women after Crane got off his stage show. They'd go out to bars, pick up women, take them back to Crane's apartment, and videotape them having sex. They would tape their sexual exploits. Carpenter was in Scottsdale when Crane was murdered. They were palling around together. Carpenter left Scottsdale the morning of the murder, several hours before Crane's body was discovered. Then blood was found in Carpenter's rental car, matching Bob Crane's rare type B blood, which is only found in 9% of the population. So the cops immediately said, this is our guy. Blood in his car. He leaves hastily from Scottsdale. We don't know his whereabouts during the murder. He became the lead suspect.
Okay, well how did he get acquitted then if the blood was found in his car? And I mean, that's especially because my aunt who passed away, she had one of those very rare blood types too. I mean, she wasn't murdered, but it's how did that blood get into his car? How did they figure that out? Because that's
I'll give you the two-letter answer. OJ.
Because it was 94, right?
Exactly.
That he was acquitted.
Bingo.
Oh, it's right.
Yes.
It's the exact same time.
DNA had come into the fore, and the jury said, "Nice, you've got blood in this guy's car. Type B." But that's still in Maricopa County, probably, I don't know. How many people would that be at that time? Maybe 80,000, 90,000 people who've got type B blood.
Right.
So, I mean, and again, we're talking about a shadow of a doubt. Well, that's a big shadow.
Exactly. And so the jury, having watched the backdrop of O.J. Simpson happening at the same time, they're thinking, where's the DNA? Where's the DNA? Well, Scottsdale, they tried. They tested it 4 times, and it all came back inconclusive. Now, DNA at that point was in its infancy. So, and this became my theory. Using 2017 DNA technology,
right,
could we get an answer that they couldn't get in 1994? That was the whole idea behind what I embarked on this book, Who Killed Bob Crane. So the jury, absent the DNA, that was a huge hangup. I spent a lot of time with the foreman of the jury, Michael Lake, about why the jury arrived at this verdict. And they said they just didn't have it. I mean, it's interesting that there's type B, but it could have come from, who knows, a mechanic who worked on the car after Carpenter turned it in. Maybe Bob Crane bled in the car earlier in the week because he was in it twice. Is it possible he might have bled in the car? They just could not pin it down. And their big missing piece was a photographed piece of subcutaneous tissue on the door, as well as the blood. This subcutaneous tissue was believed to be, basically, for lack of a better term, brain material. It was photographed, and we believe it was collected, but it was lost. So the jury had only a photograph of that. Interesting, fascinating. But because they didn't have the actual sample, it had been lost in the intervening years or maybe never collected, the jury was instructed to disregard it. They were given a Willits instruction at the trial saying if they can't produce the evidence to you, they don't physically have it, you can disregard it. And that's what happened. That between the DNA on the blood and the lack of that brain tissue in Carpenter's car that could be identified and brought into court, that killed it. The jury had reasonable doubt.
Was there was something about the weapon too? I mean, they never had a weapon, and was that something that was admitted? I mean, I read a bit about it, that there was an extrapolation, there was just an assumption that what the weapon was, and that kind of broke down their case as well, right?
Tricia, they thought it was a camera tripod because on the foot of Bob Crane's bed when he was discovered, there was a V-shaped blood stain. And investigators at the time thought, did the killer wipe the murder weapon down twice? They couldn't figure out what that was.
Oh, I see.
Well, look behind me. You see the V shape of a tripod. A collapsed tripod, that's what they eventually figured out caused that V-shaped blood stain at the base of Bob Crane's bed. Furthermore, upon reviewing the pornography, the tapes found in Crane's apartment, they realized that he had not one, but 2 tripods in his apartment, yet one was missing. So they said, you know what? The killer killed him with a collapsed tripod, struck him twice on the head with the head of the tripod, which is heavy. It's about 6 pounds. The Kwikset Junior tripod that was used, they believe, in this murder. That tripod is missing and has never been found. But a guy at Phoenix PD named Ray Giesel, they got a twin tripod and he tested it on a clay bust. And it made identical marks to the 2 horizontal marks found on the left side of Bob Crane's head. The blows that killed him.
It's still all circumstantial, though. That's the thing, right? That still is classified as circumstantial.
They didn't have the murder weapon. I mean, they felt they knew what it was, but the killer probably walked out. They believe, obviously, the killer walked out of the apartment early that morning after bludgeoning Bob Crane while he slept. He was not awake. He was sound asleep when he was killed.
Oh, wow.
Walked out of there with that collapsed tripod, and the murder weapon was never found.
So from 1978 to 1994, what happened between that? Was there any other suspects, or did they go straight to John Carpenter only?
Well, you can imagine, Tony, that John Carpenter, because of all this evidence, they felt this is probably our guy. But they did. They thought, they went through all of the pornographic tapes and tried to identify who these women were. Were they around? Did they have motive and opportunity? Did their husbands have motive and opportunity? They went through the list, but everything kind of led back to Carpenter. They felt this is our guy. I mean, we've got blood in his car. The reason they could not go forward back then was there were 2 prosecutors who looked at this and they said, you know what? We don't have a murder weapon. We don't have a confession. We don't have prints on a weapon because we can't find the murder weapon. John Carpenter, his whereabouts are, we believe he was at his hotel when it happened. We just don't have it. We don't have anything that is solid enough. Yeah, the blood in the car is intriguing, but they just did not feel that it rose to probable cause. I know that sounds crazy. And Rick Romley in 1990, when he became the new county attorney, remember the second guy I called about this case.
Right.
Rick Romley said, I think we do have something here, and we have an obligation to put this guy on trial. It's been too long. It's been, by the time they put him on trial, it had been 16 years. And that complicated the case greatly because evidence was lost. Obviously, the brain speck, the brain tissue was lost. They lost momentum. They had to start from scratch and reopen the case and start from the very beginning. And it created problems. And for the jury, they're like, this happened in 1978. Why are you guys putting this guy on trial now?
Right.
What's the problem? Right?
Well, when I remember when I watched the trials of O.J. Simpson, and it was a spectacle. Was Bob Crane, when the trial happened, was it a spectacle at the time, or did it get lost? Because he was a big star at that time. I mean, at least before that.
They got washed over by the wave of O.J. Simpson. In fact, I was covering O.J. Simpson at the time. I was there for the verdict outside of the L.A. County Courthouse. This trial was going on almost simultaneously as O.J. heating up. The trial came a little later after Crane, but O.J. was in the news constantly. And the Crane case kind of got lost. Had O.J. not happened, I think the Crane case would have been an A1 story. I'm talking about the trial of John Carpenter. But because of O.J., I mean, that eclipsed everything at the time.
So let me ask you this then, because at the beginning, when in the intro, I said, the dark side, and I guess that kind of is just the intrigue to intrigue people to watch. But what, other than the pornography, was the videos that were shot of the pornography, was it just straight porn? But I think I heard before, was it pretty graphic? Did it get pretty? Were
the women consensual to be filmed? I mean, curious
Great
about
question.
that as well. Yeah.
I've viewed a lot of these tapes. Now I know you're going to chuckle. This was for research. No, I sure, of course you're curious. You want to see the tapes. I'm going to be honest with you. But I wanted to see kind of how this all went down and see how Crane operated.
Right.
How did he get these women to take their clothes off? How did he?
And on camera.
They were all on board.
Really?
Remember that the camera equipment looked like it fell off a Soyuz spaceship back in 1978. The cameras are huge and bulky. The videotape decks look like suitcases. All of this is set up in the living room in Crane's apartment in Scottsdale. And wherever he went on the road, he would do this. This stuff was so big, you couldn't miss it. And the TV screen, a big, bulky TV set, the screen was facing the couch where all of this went down in the front living room. So the women would mug for the camera. They could see themselves in the TV set. They'd be smiling, They were all on board, thrilled to be seduced by Hogan. Right? Colonel Hogan.
Yeah, of course.
So his celebrity, he's still in 1978 on heavy rerun rotation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Had tremendous star quality.
Okay, so behind the scenes, was he a beloved person? Was there a side of him that people did not like him, off the set? What was his reputation with not only cast, but just friends?
People loved him. They really loved him. He was a very affable guy. His family adored him. His kids adored him. When he was at home, this is the split life, the dual life. Mm-hmm. Crane, when he was home with the kids, was all in. He would make movies with the kids. He loved fooling around with electronics. They'd make movies about the FBI and stuff. He loved doing that stuff. The kids absolutely adored him. A very personable, funny, likable guy. His motto in life was, don't make waves. He never liked to slight anybody. He never liked to offend anybody. He could get a little bristly on the set and in dinner theater professionally if it wasn't going the way he wanted it to. Right. He could get a little bristly about that, but generally an affable guy who never liked to make people feel uncomfortable. He was very good at making people feel comfortable in his presence. Just a really likable guy. So the women having a motive maybe to kill him, to get their tapes back, there's no sign of that in the apartment, that there was any kind of row. a jealous husband he never would have let into the apartment in the first place, because police believe whoever got in to the apartment that night to kill him was willingly let in by Bob Crane.
Yeah, because if he was
That would
sleeping,
leave
He was
a
sleeping,
woman,
right?
maybe John Carpenter, who he knew.
Yeah.
Obviously, he'd let John Carpenter in because they hung around all the time.
right.
Well, and they would do these sex, movie things together, right? John and Bob.
For a while, but
Okay.
Bob became very good at this equipment on his own. He at first needed Carpenter's expertise, and at first he needed Carpenter to procure the equipment to get it. You couldn't get it on the open market back in the mid-'60s. You couldn't get this stuff. Carpenter was his connection, the fix-it guy, the guy who would fix all the technical problems. The spool's not working, whatever, he could fix it. But by this point in 1978, and this is his son's contention, Bob Jr., that his dad was separating from Carpenter because he didn't need him anymore. He didn't need him hanging around anymore. Crane was very good at doing this on his own, and he was becoming uncomfortable with this guy hanging around him all the time.
All right, so that's a good teaser, because we're going to take just a break. We have to take a minute break to pay some bills, and like you wouldn't, that the deal.
I know, man.
Yeah,
I know.
But when we come back, I want to get into what you found. If there's anything that you found doing your own research, any new discoveries from family members, friends, anybody that
Sure.
might have, because somebody has to know something. Always. So we're going to find that out as soon as we get back from this break. We are interviewing an amazing award-winning journalist, author, John Hook, Who Killed Bob Crane. You can go to his website, whokilledbobcrane.com, and pick up the book. I think this is going to be a great read for anybody that is interested in a great murder mystery, celebrity mystery. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this message. Be right back. Do you suffer from anxiety, from depression, maybe even chronic pain? Well, listen up. Truth Be Told is going to tell you about a breakthrough program built on over 100 years of therapies used in America's returning veterans to help you successfully overcome PTSD, anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. The secret proven in study after study. Music therapy. The effects of music are nothing short of amazing. From strokes to PTSD, music has been shown to improve the quality of life. Now, one of the latest music therapy programs being used in America's veteran hospitals can be yours to experience for free at home and to help your own anxiety attacks, pain, and depression. Or just relax after a hard day. It's called Whole Tones. It takes music therapy to a new level. This revolutionary program makes use of specifically designed frequencies that have been shown to stimulate your body's natural healing power down to a cellular level. If it works for battle-scarred vets, can it work for you? Well, experience it for yourself for free at sweetwholetones.com. Like Tony Sweet, that's SWEET. Go to sweetwholetones.com. Now enjoy the show. All right, we are back. This is Truth Be Told. I'm Tony Sweet. We have the amazing, intuitive Tricia Carr in the studio with us. We're interviewing John Hook. He wrote a book called Who Killed Bob Crane. Bob Crane is a well-known actor from the 60s, well, actually probably 50s, 60s, and 70s. He was the lead in Hogan's Heroes, the series. I used to watch it as a kid. And Bob is also an award-winning journalist. I think
John.
John. What did I say, George?
I think you said Henry. No.
Oh, Henry? Yeah, Henry. No, I was kidding.
Paul and Ringo.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's my blonde country moment right there. But
I've had a million of them.
I know.
Tony.
I'm sure. But John is. This is fascinating. I love this stuff. I could sit there and watch unsolved mysteries all day long. It's my mom and I. That's what we used to do. But I want to ask Tricia here in a little bit about her intuitive, if she's getting any hits on anything that we're talking about today. But John, when you started your process of doing your research, let's start with what findings that you may have found that other people have missed, authorities may have missed, maybe new data that showed there's some other suspects or anything. Can give us something that you first found out.
Well, I think the evidence is the evidence. And so we poured back through the evidence and started going through that. In the evidence, there were a lot of interesting things. There were rumors about Bob Crane having, I'll get to the sexy stuff if you want. There were all these rumors, and John Carpenter may have started them, that Bob Crane had penile implant surgery in the 60s or early 70s to enhance his appearance for these videotapes.
That's commitment.
Not true. Not true. The medical examiner report is very clear. I mean, they examine you head to toe. And the remark about Bob Crane was male genitalia, unremarkable, which doesn't mean it's not large. It just means it's not unusual in any way. So no penile implant surgery. This was even raised in the movie Autofocus with Greg Kinnear and William Dafoe, 2002. They hit that note in the movie, but it's not true.
Oh, it's not
That's
true.
Not true. The idea that somebody snuck in through the Arcadia door leading into Crane's apartment, this would be the back door that looked out on the pool. The front door was unlocked. Victoria Berry, when she discovered Bob Crane's body, came in through the front door. She was to have a meeting with him that day and discovered him murdered in his back bedroom. She walked in because they had a meeting. They had an appointment together to meet to do an overdub in the apartment for Beginner's Luck, the play they had been working on in Scottsdale. And John Carpenter had actually shot that video a few days before at the theater. There was a problem with the audio, and she was coming over to overdub that. That's how she ended up in the apartment that day. Well, the Arcadia door was locked. In the movie Autofocus, they've got the perpetrator coming in through the Arcadia door in the dark. Well, the Arcadia door was blocked by all of this video equipment. There is no way that anybody at night in the dark trying to sneak into Bob Crane's apartment, even if it were unlocked, would be able to get in through that door through a tangle of video equipment and stealthily walk into the apartment. And if the murder weapon was a tripod, search around in the dark, find a tripod, just happen to be there, do all this with Bob Crane 15 feet away in the next room, who's a notoriously light sleeper. So that whole premise in Autofocus was really interesting. It was good cinema, but I don't believe it holds up in terms of the evidence. So these were some of the things we would start to find. Witness statements that you know, the police, they got such a bad rap on this case, and there were missteps made, to be sure, by Scottsdale PD. Mm-hmm. But if you believe that Carpenter was a killer, it's kind of like the Kennedy assassination. Everybody, you know, has all these crazy, wild theories. But if the Warren Commission was right and they arrived at the right guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, then you'd say, well, it wasn't perfect and they missed a few things, but they arrived at the right conclusion. That's kind of what you get to when you go through this Bob Crane thing. All roads lead to Carpenter. But then you get our DNA test back done in 2016. And then you go, what the heck is going on? That was the shocker of the whole thing.
I think I watched a YouTube channel with, weren't you on air with, and they got the results, or was that you?
Yes.
I remember watching.
We did it here. We did it at Fox 10. As I told you, it was a television story.
Yeah.
So I honored that, and we did the television story first, and the book came later, because I didn't want to ever jeopardize the television story, because these are the folks I work for, and they've been very good to me through the years. So it was a television story that aired first in November of 2016. And the book was being written at the same time, with the final chapter not completed because we didn't have the results back.
So when you wrote the last chapter and you got the results back, what, did anybody contact you after they read the book saying, hey, you know what? I actually know something, or I knew so-and-so. I mean, did you get any new witnesses or anything out of it just from the book itself?
You know, it's funny. I'm starting to get a little bit of that now. I'm not at liberty to discuss some of that stuff.
Oh, come on,
but
John.
I am getting people contacting me now that the book is out. The book's only been out for, let's see, we released it a week ago, Tuesday. Yeah. So a lot of the world doesn't know that we've done all this stuff. If they didn't, I mean, if you're in Phoenix, you know we did the story because Channel 10 is widely watched. But outside of Phoenix, people may not know that we did this. I mean, TMZ was all over it, and there were newspapers around the world covering this. They expected that we were going to identify the killer, which I think everybody thought they'll identify John Carpenter as the killer. Bob Crane's blood in Carpenter's car, case closed, which was the working title of my book, by the way.
Oh, really?
It was, yeah, I originally was, I was so sure that we would get back the blood and it would be linked to Bob Crane. It would be Bob Crane's blood in John Carpenter's rental car, which would be very difficult to explain why. it almost, to me, as I put it, it's almost absolute certainty that Carpenter's a killer at that point. It's just not what we got. We got an answer completely unexpected.
Well, can you say? I mean,
well,
do I have to buy
DNA? We sent it to Bodie Cellmark Forensics in Lorton, Virginia. The first discussion with them after they tested it was, we have got good data. And I'm like, oh, good. Did you have enough sample, in other words, to get it? They said, yeah, we've got good data. That was very encouraging. And then the results came back and they said, the blood in the car belongs to not Bob Crane, and it doesn't belong to John Carpenter. It is of an unknown male. And there's a secondary profile, too degraded to reach any conclusions. That's what Bodie Cellmark told me. I've had 2 other people now look at that second sample, that too degraded to reach any conclusions. And the alleles that are on that DNA strand are not Bob Crane either.
So did John Carpenter ever say anything after even being acquitted who he thought it might be?
No. John Carpenter was very defensive because he became the suspect.
Yeah.
The weekend of the murder, when Carpenter went back to LA, he lived in an apartment with a woman, a 20-year-old woman who he'd met at a strip club. She was a stripper. They shared an apartment together, even though Carpenter was married and had been married for 15 or so years. He'd been estranged from his wife and living in an apartment. They'd never gotten a divorce. But when Carpenter got back to LA after the murder, he goes to Richard Dawson's house, not to his apartment, because he and Dawson were tight. He spends the weekend at Dawson's house, and it took a while for cops to track Carpenter down. They went to the apartment, and Rita Clocher, who he was living with, said, I don't know where John is. I think he's with his mother or somewhere. I'm not sure. And Carpenter calls the apartment, and police get on the phone, and they say, we'd like to speak with you. And he says, I'm at my mother's house 70 miles away. It's going to take me an hour to get there, but I'll come back. I'd be glad to talk to you. He was very cooperative, but he wasn't exactly honest because he wasn't at his mother's house. He was at Richard Dawson's house in Beverly Hills. So these are some of the many inconsistencies that came up during the course of this investigation. Police knew of a lot of this stuff as well. I don't think there's a lot that I found that they did not know of, or at least had looked at. But it was interesting to go back through it, and you can get a different perspective on it and a different take on it. And, to me, a lot of it was all new because I did not cover the original trial of John Carpenter.
Right.
So, I mean, it's fascinating.
No, this
stuff. It really is.
And why do you think? Because I can't wait to ask Tricia her thoughts. But why do you think Bob Crane's murder is still? Because there's been many celebrities murdered before. And it kind of just comes and goes, and we kind of forget about it. Why is Bob Crane, do you think it's still so relevant and people are still so interested in his murder?
I think it's because we have never definitively identified the killer. I think in most of these cases, we know who the killer is. Even Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. I mean, you really have to put the blinders on and not believe O.J. Simpson committed that murder. You talk about an overload of DNA evidence. Right. It was almost too much. The overwhelming evidence almost hurt the prosecution in some respects. In this case, the not knowing, the mystery around it, that you have a guy snuffed out in the prime of his life. He was 2 weeks short of turning 50 years old.
Wow.
And in evidence was his final radio interview, by the way, done about, maybe 30 yards behind me. This has been a radio station and a television station. He did his final radio interview right in this building. And I've listened to that interview, and it is fascinating, where Crane's reflecting on turning 50, talking about George Burns, saying, will people still want to see me? Can I still do this? Because I love it. And he made a very interesting quote. He said, I want to go out swinging.
No.
And I thought, well, he did go out swinging. It was with someone on the other end.
Someone else was swinging.
Wielding a tripod.
Right.
It was really eerie. And so because this case has been with me my whole life, and because I went to college out here, the murder happened 7 miles from my dormitory at Arizona State. This has been part of my existence for many, many years. So it just became an obsession, I guess, for lack of a better word. But I think many people feel this is an interesting guy who we watched in reruns for many, many years. So we feel like we know him. Right. Then we learn there's this dark side, the side obsessed with pornography and homemade sex tapes. And then there's this murder that is really, to many people's mind, unsolved. I mean, right. Nobody was ever convicted of this murder. So it continues to fascinate.
Well, do you, like I said, do you mind if we bring in Tricia, the intuitive?
No, please.
I don't know if you've ever worked with a medium on this type of case, but I think it's going to be fascinating just to see if you're getting any hits through your talent. So, Tricia, go ahead and take it away.
So, I wonder if John, do you know what Carpenter looked like when he was, in 78? Because what I get a flash. I keep getting a flash of I would say a very slender, taller man. I mean, at least he's very slender, and he has a lanky kind of shape to him. And this is what I'm getting a picture of. Does that at all fit Mr. Carpenter's physique in 78?
No, short and stocky, of Native American extraction and Italian extraction.
Well, that's
very
what
dark
I get.
Complected and short and stocky.
So I just saw his face, so I couldn't tell if that. And of course, I'm seeing his face on the production here, when he's in 94. But so I see a very slender person, and I actually see him wearing like jeans and a t-shirt. And was Bob? I know you said that a lot of the all of the sex stuff happened on a couch, but was he actually sleeping in his bed?
Yes.
Okay, so I do see him on his bed, and I actually see him on, it seems like a white sheet. It seems like the covers were kicked off, and I see this tall, slender person doing the hitting, and so this is what's really strange. The thing that's what I get about a flash. I get about the scene, and the thing that I want to ask about though, and is, my goodness, if Carpenter, like, why was there anyone's blood in his car? Like, that's right. Crazy. Why was anyone's blood in his car? Okay, if it's not Bob's or his own, because that would make more sense if it was Bob's blood, because he got it on himself when he left and he took the tripod with him. But how did he not clean out his own car then if he took out the tripod, right? How did he not? If he hid the tripod, if he disposed of it, why would he not clean out his own car? So that to me is...
your visual of the bed is correct. Okay. Definitely. If it's a tall, lanky person, that definitely is not John Carpenter. So that's interesting.
I see blue in there too. I see maybe a blue curtain. I see a blue, not quilt, the kind of one that was almost velour with the pattern on it. That's what I see as well. So I don't know if that's something that you saw any of the pictures.
Well, it's interesting you're getting blue, because blue was the vinyl in John Carpenter's rental car.
Okay.
The vinyl was blue.
It's like
the blood is red, right? There are some blood streaks and smears on the door. It's not much. It's not much, by the way. This is not a bloodbath in the car.
Right.
This is believed to be deposited by the murder weapon put in the passenger seat. And then it's rubbing against the top of the door, the passenger door, when you're accelerating and braking, and it's leaving streaks. Okay. Now you ask, why did he not see it?
Right.
You ready?
Yes.
John Carpenter was colorblind.
Oh, so he couldn't see the red and the blue?
That is a theory, that he may not, in low light, early in the morning, maybe between 3:30 and 5:30 in the morning, when he might have left the apartment, if he's the guy.
And he could have cleaned some of it, but he didn't see that bit. Like, he wiped it, but he missed
Just
some.
may not have literally seen it.
Got it.
That would suck if you're
that amazing.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, with all of that, to me, so I'll tell you, I got that flash when we started talking, before you revealed that there was an unknown person's blood that was identified in the DNA. So that's what I was picking up. And so then to me, it speaks to a cohort. I mean,
that is really interesting you say that.
If we
and
take
here's
my
why.
vision as something that is potentially true, the vision that I get, and then the car, and you know what I mean? Like, so yeah.
No, that is a very interesting thing that I have thought a lot about. There are two things, everything, like we talked about. This is one of the fascinating parts of the book, Who Killed Bob Crane? All roads lead to Carpenter. When you're reading it, I think you're going to go, wow, man, this looks like Carpenter, looks like Carpenter. There are a couple of things in there. He's so cooperative in the police interviews that gives you pause. The fact that he was so cooperative and agreed to meet with them twice, agreed to give them a blood sample of his own blood, said he would help them in any way, even said, I'll do sodium pentothal, I'll do truth serum, let's do a lie detector. They didn't do it because they felt that they needed to know more before they put him on a polygraph.
Was he a sociopath?
Cops say that he would have lawyered up if it ever would have gotten to that this was a ruse and a bluff, that he would have lawyered up and said, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing that. Let's not do that because they think I'm the guy who did it. I'm not doing a polygraph. But when you're reading this, you're going along, there are a couple things that catch you where you go, man, this is, number one, if his best friend is Bob Crane, they're best friends. Would Carpenter kill the guy who's allowing him access to all the women? This is the goose that laid the golden egg, as John Carpenter said. Why would I kill him? He's my best friend. He provided all the spoils for me.
Was there jealousy?
Why would I take him out? That's something that gives you pause.
Was there any type of jealousy at all?
Well, this is the thing. John Carpenter was likely at least bisexual. I discussed this in the book. He may have had a deeper love for Bob Crane than was reciprocated. Okay. But the other thing that's bothersome, and you talked about it, Tricia, the blood in the car. If you've just murdered somebody and you have medium velocity spatter on your person, now granted, he might have had time to clean up in the apartment, but there's nothing found on it. Driving the car, something on the driver's side, nothing. It's all on the other side. And this gets at your idea of that is an interest, because I know other people who do this. Why is there no driver's side if the killer is driving the car?
Well, I got to tell you my feeling about it. So when I have just the picture that Tony had up earlier on my iPad of Carpenter, and just seeing his face, I see and feel a lot of great remorse, and I see guilt is a secondary. It's more about depression. And so then this is, again, me putting together all my feelings and then that intuitive flash. And then with that bit about the potential bisexuality, and the picture of the lanky person I get is like kind of, I'm sorry to say, but like a homeless kind of drug addict. And to me, this is me extrapolating, but it is someone that he picked up, a prostitute, and he paid him some extra money to go do that because of some jealousy and some hurt feelings. And he can't do it himself. He's not the kind of person who could do it, but he's the kind of person who could be.
I get where you're coming from. Yeah. It's still, problematic because of the crime scene. And you have to go back to the forensics, because there's no sign of forced entry. There's no sign of disturbance or robbery or anything taken. There's no row in the apartment. Stuff isn't knocked over.
Yeah.
If Bob Crane, whoever was in there, Bob Crane was comfortable enough, if he did let them into the apartment, whoever it was, he was comfortable enough to climb into bed and curl up in the fetal position and go to sleep.
But wasn't the front door
killer
open?
In the apartment. Now, a homeless guy coming over with Carpenter, you can imagine.
But
you're not going to just lay down and go to sleep with that going on in your apartment.
But couldn't he have sent him in later, is what I'm saying? Like he left.
Like he was there,
and
opened the door for him.
And you say the front door was open, right? While Bob was sleeping. No, it's not possible.
The front door was open because it's believed that the killer left the apartment out the front door and could not obviously lock it on the way out as you're leaving, right?
But couldn't somebody that had, just so you know, we only have a couple minutes left because I know you got to get on air, but could somebody had been there, like let's say John Carpenter, open the door, let somebody in to do the business, and then leave together?
Well, again, you're getting into anything's possible.
Right.
And this is the thing that you come back to. It is kind of, one of the investigators, Jim Raines, he said, and I know it sounds like hyperbole, he said, this is our Kennedy assassination in Arizona.
Right.
I mean, there are as many theories abound about who killed Bob Crane and what happened. And even people who after the fact stepped forward and admitted to it, and they turned out to be deranged lunatics, or people in prison who were trying to cop a deal and get out early, thinking ratting somebody out. There are so many theories that it's endless. But I'll tell you what, with what we found in that DNA sample that doesn't come back to Bob Crane, it does give you pause. I mean, it really does. And I believe had the Maricopa County Attorney's Office had our evidence, our finding in 1994, I don't think they could have put John Carpenter on trial in good conscience. If their blood sample came back and it's not Bob Crane in John Carpenter's car, I think they would have had a tough time going forward.
Right.
I'm not sure the judge would have allowed him to go forward.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about major reasonable doubt and maybe malicious prosecution to go down that road. So I think this is a really significant finding. I'm not saying that it exonerates John Carpenter. Far from it, but it does raise questions.
Yeah.
It can't be just dismissed out of hand.
And this is why we keep talking about it.
Exactly, Tony.
Well, congratulations on the book. Please go to his website, whokilledbobcrane.com. This is John Hook, amazing award-winning journalist, an author that you can pick up on Amazon, on his website. I'm sure any place books are sold. And so are you going to be doing any book signings coming up, John? Or
I am. I'm doing one at Arizona State University on the 15th of March, 7 to 8 at the Cronkite School in downtown Phoenix, where I went to college, got my degree. Great. And I felt it would be the right thing to do it there. And I'm giving part of the money, that we bring in that night to my scholarship, the John Hook Journalism Scholarship at ASU. So we're going to kick a little money back to ASU, and I want to do that. But Tony, I'm glad you mentioned the website. And the reason I think it's important, not only, and believe me, honestly, not just to push the book, but I believe it's a really good resource for the people who read the book, because you can dive back in and see some of the forensic evidence laid out on the website. It will help the reader understand the apartment, the layout of the apartment. I mean, a lot of this is in the book. We've put a lot of pictures in the book as well in Who Killed Bob Crane. But the website is great. It's a good resource for the reader if you're into true crime, because we put a lot of really interesting stuff there that we couldn't really fit in the book. Video taken of the crime scene of Bob Crane's apartment that many people, well, no one had ever seen it except investigators. They took video that day when they discovered his body. Everybody's seen the still pictures, but the video is mesmerizing, because that's the really real-time look at how it looked in that apartment when they walked in.
Well, Bob, thank you so. Bob. And now I'm calling him Bob. Maybe I'm.
That's what you said earlier.
Tony, it's no problem.
Was it Bob? Oh, okay. Well, at least it was something pertaining to the show. Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. Next time, come back and see us. Like I said, it's an honor to have you on, and like I said, this is just an honor to have somebody of his quality on Truth Be Told. So, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Tony, Tricia, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoy the book.
Oh, please. Will do, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break. We have another show right after this, but go to our website, truthbetoldwebtv.com. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio, iTunes, and watch our YouTube channel. And Tricia, where do people find you?
My website is triciacarrcharm.com. That's TRICIACARR, and you can find my my webcast and podcast by searching Charmed Life with Tricia Carr. Thank you.
All right, until next time, we'll see you then.